Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time, we're exploring personality types. You know, those 16 unique combinations that help us understand, well, ourselves and everyone around us.
Yeah, it's like a code to understanding why people do the things they do.
Right. Like why some people love planning everything out in detail, while others just go with the flow.
Exactly. And once you start to see those patterns, it's like you've unlocked a secret level of understanding human behavior.
So true. So for our listeners who are just starting to learn about this stuff, we're going to break down each of the 16 personality types.
And for those of you who are already familiar with the basics, we're going to go deeper and explore those fascinating connections between the types.
Like how certain types might seem completely different on the surface, but actually share some core personality traits.
Exactly. And we'll talk about how those shared traits can lead to both harmony and conflict in relationships, at work, and just navigating life in general.
All right, let's jump right in. We're going to start with the group known as the analysts. These are the folks who are driven by logic, strategy, and a deep desire to understand how things work.
They're the masterminds behind the scenes, always analyzing, planning, and strategizing.
I always picture them with giant chessboards in their heads, constantly thinking 5 steps ahead.
That's a great analogy. They're the architects of ideas, the ones who can see the big picture and develop long-range plans.
First up, we have the INTJ, often called the scientist.
The INTJs are fascinating. They're driven by this powerful intuition that allows them to see patterns and possibilities that others might miss.
I've heard they could be pretty intense and focused.
That intensity comes from their dominant function, introverted intuition.
Introverted intuition. That sounds deep.
It is. Imagine having this inner compass that guides your decisions, almost like a sixth sense.
Whoa, that's pretty cool.
Right. INTJs use that intuition to understand complex systems and predict future trends.
So they're the ones who can see the writing on the wall before anyone else.
Exactly. They're visionaries, often coming up with groundbreaking ideas and strategies.
But I imagine that same intensity can sometimes make them seem, I don't know, a little distant or detached.
That's the challenge for INTJs. They need to learn to communicate their insights in a way that others can understand.
Always, it's like they're speaking a different language.
Exactly. And that can lead to frustration on both sides.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, what about the INTP, the thinker? They're also considered analysts, but I get a very different vibe from them.
INTPs are fascinating too. They share that dominant introverted intuition with INTJs, but they express it in a more outward, analytical way.
So while INTJs might keep their insights to themselves, INTPs are more likely to share them, debate them, and test them out in the real world.
You got it. They're driven by a deep curiosity to understand how things work, and they're not afraid to challenge conventional wisdom.
So they're the ones who are always asking why and how.
Precisely. They love to dissect ideas, poke holes in arguments, and explore all sides of an issue.
I can see how that could be both enlightening and a little frustrating for the people around them.
Definitely. INTPs can come across as rebellious or argumentative, but it's really just their way of seeking truth.
It's like they need to remember that not everyone wants to dissect every single detail of every single thing.
Right. Sometimes you just need to enjoy the ride without overanalyzing it.
Okay, we've talked about the introverted analysts. Now let's move on to the extroverted ones, starting with the ENTJ, the executive. I immediately think of CEOs and military commanders.
ENTJs are natural-born leaders, no doubt about it. They're decisive, strategic, and driven to achieve their goals.
And they're not afraid to take charge and make tough decisions.
Exactly. They excel in roles that require leadership, organization, and a clear vision for the future.
But I imagine that same drive for efficiency could sometimes backfire in their personal lives.
You're right. ENTJs need to be mindful of their tendency to be controlling, especially in relationships where a softer touch is needed.
It's like they need to learn to switch gears from command mode to relationship mode.
That's a great way to put it. And finally, we have the ENTP, the visionary. They're like a whirlwind of ideas and possibilities, constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
I get the sense that they're the ones who can brainstorm a dozen solutions before you've even finished explaining the problem.
That's the ENTP in a nutshell. They're fueled by extroverted intuition, just like ENTJs, but they're more interested in exploring ideas than implementing them.
So while an ENTJ might focus on building a successful business, an ENTP might be more interested in coming up with the next big invention.
Exactly. ENTPs are the innovators, the ones who are always thinking outside the box.
They sound like a lot of fun to be around, but maybe a little chaotic.
That's the challenge for ENTPs. They need to learn to focus their energy and follow through on their ideas.
Otherwise, they risk becoming scattered and spreading themselves too thin.
Exactly. But when they find that balance, they can truly change the world with their creativity and vision.
So we've covered the analyst, the INTJ, INTP, ENTJ, and ENTP. What I'm noticing is that even within this one group, there's so much variation. It's not just about being logical, it's about how that logic is expressed and applied in the world.
That's a great observation, and that's why understanding personality types is so valuable. It goes beyond simple labels and helps us appreciate the nuances of human behavior. Ready to move on to the diplomats.
Absolutely. These are the types known for their empathy, their intuition, and their desire to create harmony.
They're the peacemakers, the healers, the ones who bring people together.
I'm curious to see how they differ from the analysts we just discussed.
You'll be surprised by the contrasts. While analysts focus on systems and structures, diplomats are all about understanding and connecting with people.
Okay, let's start with the INFJ, the protector.
The INFJs are incredibly rare, making up only about 1% of the population. They're driven by a deep sense of purpose and a desire to make the world a better place.
But what makes them different from other types who also want to make a positive impact?
It's their unique combination of introverted intuition and extroverted feeling. They have that same inner compass as INTJs, but they use it to understand people, not systems.
So they can sense others' emotions and motivations with incredible accuracy.
Exactly, and they use that insight to help others grow and reach their full potential.
That sounds almost magical.
It can feel that way. INFJs often have a deep understanding of human nature and a gift for connecting with people on a soul level.
But I imagine there must be challenges that come with being so deeply empathetic.
Absolutely. INFJs can be easily overwhelmed by negativity, and they might take on too much responsibility for others' well-being.
It's like they need to learn to protect their own energy while still being the compassionate souls they are.
Exactly. Now let's talk about the INFP, the idealist. They share that dominant introverted feeling with INFJs, but they have a different way of expressing it.
So they're also guided by their values, but they might express them in a more creative or artistic way.
You're right. INFPs are often drawn to writing, music, art, or any form of self-expression that allows them to connect with their inner world.
I get a sense that they're deeply sensitive and perhaps a bit more vulnerable than other types.
That's true. INFPs have a rich inner world that they don't always share, and they can be deeply affected by criticism or rejection.
It's like they need to learn to embrace their imperfections and trust that their unique perspective is valuable.
Exactly. INFPs have so much to offer the world if they can overcome their self-doubt and share their gifts.
Okay, we've talked about the introverted diplomats. Now let's move on to the extroverted ones, starting with the ENFJ, the giver.
Oh, ENFJs are incredible. They're like walking, talking rays of sunshine, radiating warmth and positivity wherever they go.
I've heard they're incredibly charismatic and have a gift for bringing people together.
That's their superpower. They have this amazing ability to connect with people from all walks of life and make everyone feel seen and heard.
So they're the ones who can walk into a room full of strangers and leave with a dozen new friends.
Exactly. ENFJs are natural connectors and community builders.
They sound like a lot of fun to be around, but is there a potential downside to being so focused on others' needs?
Of course. Like INFJs, ENFJs can be overly selfless, neglecting their own needs in the process.
It's that whole giving too much of yourself thing.
Exactly. ENFJs need to remember that it's okay to prioritize their own well-being, too.
Here, finally, we have the ENFP, the inspirer. They sound like a burst of energy and enthusiasm.
ENFPs are like fireworks. They're bright, sparkly, and always illuminating the world with their unique perspective.
I get the sense that they're the life of the party, always ready for an adventure.
That's the ENFP spirit. They're spontaneous, fun-loving, and always up for trying new things.
They sound amazing, but do they ever struggle with follow-through?
That's the ENFP paradox. They have so many ideas and passions that it can be hard for them to focus on just one.
It's like they have a million tabs open in their brain.
Exactly. But when they learn to channel their energy and focus on what truly matters to them, they can achieve amazing things.
So we've covered the analysts and the diplomats. It's fascinating to see how these seemingly different types can actually share some core personality traits.
And it's those shared traits that create both harmony and conflict in our relationships and interactions.
It's all starting to make sense. All right, are you ready to move on to the next group, the Sentinels?
Let's do it. These are the types that bring order and stability to the world.
Okay, that sounds like a very different energy from the diplomats.
You're right. While diplomats focus on harmony and connection, Sentinels are all about structure, tradition, and doing things the right way.
Sounds like my kind of people. Let's dive in.
All right, let's start with the ISTJ, often referred to as the duty fulfiller. These are the folks who are reliable, practical, and dedicated to doing what needs to be done.
If you need a project completed on time and within budget, an ISTJ is your go-to person.
Exactly. ISTJs are the backbone of any organization. They're detail-oriented, organized, and always follow through on their commitments.
I imagine they thrive in environments with clear expectations and established procedures.
You got it. They love structure and predictability.
But I imagine they could also be resistant to change or new ideas.
That's the potential downside of their strong preference for the tried and true. They can be a little inflexible at times.
It's like they need to learn to loosen up a little and embrace the unexpected.
Exactly. Now, what about the ISFJ, the nurturer? I get a much warmer vibe from them, even though they're also in the Sentinel group.
They sound lovely.
They are. ISFJs are the caregivers of the world. They're incredibly warm, compassionate, and always putting the needs of others before their own.
So they're the ones who always remember birthdays, bring homemade cookies at potlucks, and offer a listening ear when you're feeling down.
Exactly. ISFJs are the glue that holds families and communities together.
They sound like amazing friends and family members, but I imagine they might also be sensitive to criticism or conflict.
That's true. ISFJs can be easily hurt by rejection or disapproval, and they might avoid conflict even when it's necessary to address an issue.
It's a reminder that even the most nurturing souls need to develop a strong sense of self-worth and healthy boundaries.
Exactly. Okay, now let's talk about the ESTJ, the guardian. They sound a lot like ISTJs, but with a more extroverted energy.
So they're also organized and practical, but maybe a little more outgoing and assertive.
You got it. ESTJs are the ones who take charge and make sure things run smoothly.
They sound like natural leaders.
They are. They excel in roles that require organization, efficiency, and a clear chain of command.
But I imagine their leadership style could also be a bit, well, inflexible at times.
That's the potential pitfall for ESTJs. They can be so focused on doing things by the book that they miss opportunities for innovation or fail to adapt to changing circumstances.
It's like they need to learn to bend the rules sometimes.
Exactly. And finally, we have the ESFJ, the caregiver. I get a sense of warmth and generosity from them, similar to ISFJs.
They sound like the ultimate hosts, always making sure everyone feels welcome and taken care of.
That's the ESFJ in a nutshell. They love connecting with people, creating a sense of harmony, and making sure everyone feels included.
I imagine they're also great at organizing events and remembering important details.
No, absolutely. They're the ones who plan the best parties, remember everyone's birthdays, and always have a thoughtful gift on hand.
They sound like amazing friends, but I imagine they might also be sensitive to criticism or conflict, just like ISFJs.
That's true. ESFJs can be easily hurt by rejection or disapproval, and they might avoid conflict even when it's necessary.
It's that whole people-pleasing tendency.
Exactly. ESFJs need to learn to prioritize their own needs and set healthy boundaries.
Okay, we've covered the analysts, the diplomats, and now the sentinels. It's amazing how each group has its own unique energy and approach to life.
It is, and it's important to remember that there's no best type. Each one brings its own strengths and challenges to the table.
Absolutely. All right, are you ready to explore the final group, the explorers?
Let's do it. These are the types that are all about action, experience, and living life to the fullest.
They sound like my kind of people. What makes them unique?
Explorers are adaptable, resourceful, and always up for a challenge.
I'm intrigued. Let's start with the ISTP, the mechanic. I picture them as the ultimate tinkerers, always taking things apart and putting them back together.
That's a great way to describe them. ISTPs are natural problem solvers with a knack for understanding how things work.
I bet they were the kids who were always taking apart their toys to see how they worked.
Exactly. They love to get their hands dirty and figure things out through trial and error.
But I imagine they might also struggle with expressing their emotions or connecting with people on a deeper level.
That's the challenge for ISTPs. They need to learn to balance their logical minds with their emotional hearts.
It's all about finding that balance. Now, what about the ISFP, the artist? They also seem like independent souls, but in a different way.
ISFPs are the creatives of the world. They express themselves through art, music, fashion, or any form of self-expression that allows them to connect with their inner beauty.
They sound like free spirits following their own path.
Exactly. They're driven by a deep sense of personal values and a desire to live a life that is authentic to themselves.
I bet they make amazing artists and musicians.
They do. They have a unique way of seeing the world and expressing that vision through their creative work.
But I imagine they might also struggle with criticism or conflict. just like INFPs.
That's true. ISFPs can be sensitive souls, and they need to learn to protect their hearts while still sharing their gifts with the world.
All about finding that balance again. Okay, let's talk about the ESTP, the doer. I get a sense of energy and excitement from them.
ESTPs are the adrenaline junkies of the personality world. They're bold, charismatic, and always up for an adventure.
So they're the ones who are always skydiving, bungee jumping, and starting their own businesses.
Exactly. ESTPs are drawn to action and excitement. They thrive in fast-paced environments and love to push the limits.
But I imagine they might also struggle with commitment or following through on long-term plans.
That's the challenge for ESTPs. They can be impulsive and easily bored, so they need to find ways to stay focused and motivated.
It's all about finding that balance between spontaneity and discipline.
You got it. And finally, we have the ESFP, the performer. I get a sense of joy and spontaneity from them, similar to ESTPs, but maybe a little more focused on people and relationships.
They sound like the life of the party.
That's the ESFP. They're outgoing, enthusiastic, and love to be surrounded by people.
I imagine they're great at entertaining and making everyone feel good.
Absolutely. ESFPs have a natural charm and charisma that draws people to them.
But I imagine they might also struggle with routine or structure.
That's true. ESFPs need freedom to express themselves and experience new things.
It's like they need to find a career or a lifestyle that allows them to be constantly on the move.
Exactly. So there you have it, the 16 personality types in a nutshell.
Wow, that was a whirlwind tour of the human psyche.
It's amazing how much diversity exists within our species, isn't it? And we've only just scratched the surface.
I'm already starting to see those types in the people around me, and I'm even starting to see myself in some of them.
That's the power of personality typing. It helps us understand ourselves and others in a whole new way.
I can't wait to dive deeper into each type.
Well, get ready, because in part 2, we'll unpack even more insights about how these personalities interact and play out in real-life situations. Welcome back to our deep dive into the 16 personality types.
It's amazing how we can see these connections between the types, even when they seem totally different on the surface.
Right, like those aha moments when you realize that two seemingly opposite personalities actually share a fundamental way of processing information.
Totally. It's like they're speaking different languages, but the underlying grammar is the same.
Exactly. And that's what makes this so fascinating. It's not just about labeling people. It's about understanding the deeper mechanisms that drive our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
So true. So last time we left off with the explorers, those action-oriented, experience-seeking individuals.
Right. Those folks who are always pushing boundaries and testing limits.
I'm excited to unpack them further. Where should we start?
Let's revisit the ISTP, the mechanic, if you will.
Oh, yeah, the ones who can fix anything.
Right. But it's more than just fixing things, you know. It's about their approach to problem solving.
Like they're not just following instructions, they're figuring things out for themselves.
Exactly. ISTPs have this incredible ability to analyze a situation, break it down into its component parts, and then come up with a practical solution.
I bet they're the kids who are always taking apart their toys to see how they work.
Totally. And they're not afraid to get their hands dirty. They love to experiment, tinker, and learn through hands-on experience.
I can see how that could be both a blessing and a curse.
How so?
Well, on the one hand, they're incredibly resourceful and adaptable, you know. They can figure out how to fix almost anything.
Right.
But on the other hand, I could see them getting frustrated in situations where they're not allowed to, figure things out for themselves.
That's a great point. ISTPs definitely need a certain level of autonomy and freedom to thrive.
It's like they need to be able to explore, experiment, and make mistakes in order to learn.
Exactly. And that independent streak extends to their relationships as well.
Oh, interesting. So they're not the clingy type.
Not at all. ISTPs value their personal space and freedom.
They're not afraid to be alone with their thoughts and their projects.
Right. And they're not going to be the ones who need constant reassurance or attention.
Makes sense. Now, how does this compare to the ISFP, the artist?
ISFPs are also incredibly independent, but their independence manifests in a different way.
Like they're not necessarily rebels or nonconformists, but they have their own unique way of expressing themselves.
Exactly. ISFPs are driven by a deep inner sense of beauty and harmony.
They see the world through an artist's lens, noticing details and nuances that others might miss.
And they express that vision through their art, whether it's painting, music, dance, or even just the way they dress.
I could see how that would make them seem a bit mysterious or aloof.
It's not that they're trying to be distant. It's just that their inner world is so rich and vibrant that it can be hard to put into words.
Like they're communicating through their art rather than through language.
Exactly. And they're not necessarily seeking approval or validation from others. They're creating for themselves, first and foremost.
That's a powerful form of independence.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about the introverted explorers. Now, what about the extroverted ones, the ESTP and the ESFP? How do they express their independence?
Well, ESTPs, the doers, express their independence through action.
Like they're not just going to sit around and talk about it. They're going to get out there and make things happen.
Exactly. ESTPs are all about taking risks, pushing boundaries, and experiencing life to the fullest.
I bet they're the ones who are always up for a challenge, whether it's physical, mental, or emotional.
Totally. They thrive on excitement and novelty, and they're not afraid to step outside their comfort zone.
I could see how that could be incredibly inspiring, but also a little exhausting for the people around them.
It's true. ESTPs can be a bit much sometimes, with their constant need for stimulation and action.
It's like they have an endless supply of energy.
They do. And that energy can be contagious, but it can also be overwhelming if you're not used to it.
Okay, so what about ESFPs? How do they express their independence?
Well, ESFPs are similar to ESTPs in that they're also very action-oriented and spontaneous.
Right. I remember we talked about them being the performers.
Exactly. But their focus is more on people and relationships.
So, while an ESTP might be off on a solo adventure, an ESFP is more likely to be surrounded by friends, sharing experiences, and making memories.
You got it. ESFPs love to connect with people and bring joy to the world.
They're the life of the party, the ones who can light up a room with their smile.
And they have this incredible ability to make everyone feel welcome and included.
But I imagine they might also struggle with commitment or routine, just like ESTPs.
That's true. ESFPs need a lot of freedom and flexibility to thrive. They don't do well in environments that are too structured or restrictive.
It's like they need to be able to express themselves authentically, without feeling stifled or held back.
Exactly. And when they're allowed to be themselves, they can bring so much joy and light to the world.
This has been so insightful. I'm starting to see how each type's expression of independence is tied to their core cognitive functions.
It's fascinating, isn't it? It's like each type has its own unique blueprint for navigating the world.
And understanding those blueprints can help us appreciate the diversity of human experience.
Exactly. It's not about judging or labeling people. It's about understanding and appreciating the unique gifts that each type brings to the table.
I'm loving this. What other connections between the types are waiting to be discovered? Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about analysts, diplomats, sentinels, and explorers.
And we've seen how these types, while seemingly distinct, actually connect in some pretty fascinating ways.
Right. Like how certain types might seem total opposites on the surface, but actually share a fundamental way of processing information.
Exactly. Like they're speaking different languages, but the underlying grammar is the same.
Yeah. And that's what I love about this stuff. It's not just about putting people in boxes, you know?
Sure.
It's about understanding the deeper mechanisms that drive our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors.
Totally. It's about seeing the patterns and connections that make us who we are.
So we've explored these connections between the types, but there's still one piece missing, you know?
What's that?
The so what factor. Like, why does all this matter? How can understanding personality types actually benefit us in our daily lives?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
It is.
And honestly, I think the answer is pretty simple.
Okay, I'm listening.
Understanding personality types helps us understand ourselves and others better.
Okay, that makes sense.
It's like having a user manual for your own mind, you know? Once you understand your default settings, you can start to make more conscious choices about how you operate in the world.
And it's not just about ourselves, right?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It's also about understanding the people around us.
Like why our partner does the things they do or why our boss reacts the way they do.
Exactly. When we can see things from other people's perspectives, it can really help us navigate relationships more effectively.
So instead of getting frustrated when someone doesn't react the way we expect them to, we can try to understand where they're coming from.
Exactly. And that can make a huge difference in our interactions, whether it's at home, at work, or just out in the world.
It's like once you understand that people are wired differently, you can stop taking things so personally.
Totally. And you can start to appreciate the diversity of human experience.
This makes me think about workplaces. Imagine if every team had a personality expert on hand.
Ah, that would be amazing.
Right. They could help everyone understand each other's strengths and weaknesses.
And they could facilitate communication and collaboration in a way that really honors everyone's unique perspective.
It would be like having a secret weapon for teamwork. But this goes beyond work, right?
Absolutely.
This applies to families, friendships, romantic relationships, any interaction where human beings are involved.
That's the beauty of it. It's a universal language that can help us navigate all the complexities of human interaction.
Wow, this has been such an eye-opening deep dive. I feel like I've gained a whole new perspective on myself and the people around me.
Me too. And the best part is, this is just the beginning.
What do you mean?
There's so much more to explore. There are books, articles, websites, all dedicated to helping people understand personality types in more depth.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize how much information was out there.
There's a whole world of knowledge waiting to be discovered.
So, to our listeners out there, we encourage you to dive in and explore.
Find out what makes you tick.
Learn about your strengths and your challenges.
And use this knowledge to create more fulfilling relationships and a more meaningful life.
It's all about understanding who you are and who you want to be.
Exactly.
This has been another deep dive. Thank you so much for listening.
It's been a pleasure. Until next time, keep exploring.